Okay, let me is on that. I like even more.
All right, now we have quorum.
All right. Good evening, Councilman.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
You're
Yes.
really
Oh,
quiet
great. I'm
though.
having some technical difficulties. Thank you. Hi, everyone.
Perfect. We can hear you. All right. We're gonna call the February 13th, 2024 Wood Village Council meeting to order. And we will start. Would you like to read the land acknowledgement?
Sure. The Chinookan peoples known as the Clackamas and Cascades are the indigenous people of the land now inhabited by the city of Wood Village and other areas of the Columbia River. The village of Nachoki, now referred to as Nechokwi, was located near today's Blue Lake Park. Ancestral life of these peoples included a seasonal round of resource gathering and stewardship from the Wapato fields and fishing areas of the Columbia River to the cedar and huckleberry gathering areas of the High Cascades. Introduced to disease from early settlers dramatically reduced the number of these people. They signed the Willamette Valley Treaty of 1855 in the United States government and were forcibly removed to the Grand Ronde Indian Reservation. We thank the descendants of these tribes for being the original stewards and protectors of these lands since time immemorial. We also acknowledge the systematic policies of genocide, relocation, assimilation that still impact many Indigenous Native American families today. We are honored by the collective work of many Native nations, leaders and families who have been demonstrating resilience, resistance, revitalization, healing, and creativity. We are honored to be the guests upon these lands.
All right, now we do the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll take any citizen comments on non-agenda items.
Thank you, Council President. I do have two comments. I'll say they're not so much from community members, but follow up from last meeting's comments that were made both on some storm winter activity as well as, homelessness and some things in that regard. So in regards to homelessness and updates on that, at the last meeting, I shared that we will be elevating things with the county and the joint office to get resources to our HOPE team to do the job that they've been doing for several years for us. And I'm happy to say for those of you that were able to drive in today, you might have noticed Halsey is completely empty. So those that had called Halsey home, many of them have actually been housed into like a shelter or some kind of pathway towards more permanent supportive housing. There was one couple who just declined everything and decided just to find a new place to park and figure out where they're going from there. But everyone else found some kind of housing or shelter. And I know our chief will talk a little more details about that. But looks like putting some pressure on the county paid off and got other parts of the county resources they've been asking for. So we'll continue in that trajectory and service. The other comment is we've gotten word of maybe some winter weather tomorrow, some snow, maybe some ice, frosty conditions. And so what we did is we went out today and not only kind of treated the park and city hall area at de-icer, but then we hit our target priority roads with de-icer in anticipation that if we do get some kind of frost or freezing, the forecast is real iffy. It's either going to be something or it'll be nothing. And we thought lessons learned from last time, let's try to be a little proactive since we have the time and opportunity equipment. So we did hit our priority roads with de-icer as well.
Thank you. No other comments? All right. We'll move on to public safety report.
Council.
Good evening.
Yeah, I'd just like to expand upon what Manager Jerks was talking about. We were very successful. One person that had been parked there for some time, we were able to get him shelter at the Hope Center, and another couple in a couple's housing. And with that, we were able to assist them, or the Hope team was able to assist them in getting their vehicles salvaged for extra income for them. So that has been pretty successful, and I'm pretty proud of our Hope team and their efforts on that. Just a little overview from what we had in January. Obviously, we had the significant weather event, which hopefully we won't be repeating. We had 18 emergency calls for service total, 9 traffic accidents, but as you can assume, a lot of that was related to the severe weather we experienced. We had a few domestic related incidents, 7, 106 non-emergency calls for service, 24 arrests total, and of those 24 arrests, 13 of those arrests were for warrants, and a total of 108 traffic stops. One note on the traffic stops, we did do an enhanced public safety mission in this area, so that may have increased those numbers a little bit. Looking at reported vehicles stolen, it's pretty consistent with the previous 31-day period. We had 2 and as well as last year's average. And then, recovered stolens. And then reported stolen vehicles, we had 2 in the last 31 days, which is 1 up from the previous month and on par with last year's average. And I'm sure you all have the report as well. We really didn't see any significant changes in the numbers over the past 31-day period, except for the traffic stops. But as I spoke about, we did do an enhanced public safety mission in this area. So, and that's about all I have for you. Any questions for me?
Councilor Min, any questions?
No questions. Thank you. And yeah, just thank you very much. It's very great news about our neighbors on Halsey.
Absolutely.
The polar plunge?
Oh, thank you. On behalf of Sheriff Mornicia O'Donnell, I would like to invite you all to join me and our team captain Violet Wild for the polar plunge. Our team name is MCSO Polar Patrol, and if I may, I have a handout for all of you. I will be in attendance as well.
Sounds cold. Sounds cold.
No, it sounds cool.
Oh, that's what I meant to say. Sorry. As the D.
I am planning to participate in the plunge part, not the run part. I'm not built for running. I'm built for cold insulated, I got insulation in cold water.
Greg, are you going to wear a Care Bear costume?
I think I'm just going to go hardcore and just like board shorts and a t-shirt
Oh, dang.
because I am told I need a t-shirt in public.
So you can participate in both or just one. I will be doing the 5K and the polar plunge, but we would love to have you there for either one. So thanks for your consideration. Sorry.
Great. I just appreciate the level of teamwork effort that you and obviously the city has put to help assist those individuals on Halsey as, some of them have been there for quite some time. And then obviously with the winter storm, how that might have affected them. And so I just appreciate, again, the consistency and putting that pressure on the county and then the teamwork with the Hope team and yourself. So really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
We'll move on to review of bills paid. Any questions on those? Nope. I will entertain a motion on consent calendar.
Oh, I motion to approve the consent calendar.
I second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Right, now we'll move to discussion of sewer trunk line flow monitoring.
And I am not John, so filling in for him again. But we do have Erica here, and she will, in the next little bit be more of the public face for Public Works. But in the meantime, you're stuck with me for the bulk of this meeting, unfortunately. So let me go ahead and.
Are you sure you don't want to try it now?
Hey, I gave her like a solid hour notice to prepare, and she thought that wasn't enough.
Plenty of time.
So this is a discussion, no actions needed by the council. We just wanted to keep you informed of what we're doing. Because this amount is less than $50,000, it does not need council approval. There's also just limited number of bids and proposals that firms do this work. So we just want to be a little extra transparent in our selection of the contractor and also just what we're doing. So this is the main trunk line flow monitor. We touched on this at the retreat on Saturday. And basically, this is the number one project out of the master plan, which is upsizing our trunk line from 15-inch to 27. That comes with an enormous cost, and we just want to make sure that whatever we build is going to suit us for the next, 50 plus years and is the right instrument for our community. And so what we've done since the master plan, we televised the entire run of the trunk line. It's actually in quite remarkable condition, which is great. There are a lot of parts of it that are quite full though. And so that's where flow monitoring comes in and I have a map at the next slide kind of showing this line where we currently monitor our flows and how this will both verify our flows as well as look at Fairview's flows into this line. It is a shared facility once we get at our city border. And how our current agreement with Fairview is written is that portion of the sewer line is a shared cost based on the amount of sewer going into it. So for example, let's just say it's 100,000 gallons going through it. It's more than that, but simple numbers for me. We're contributing 40,000 gallons. Fairview contributes 60,000 gallons. It would be a 40-60 split. Now, again, I'm just using rough numbers, and I'm sure there'll be some negotiation with Fairview on what that split really looks like and, repayment, and there'll be more work with that. But this is the first phase of that portion as well. So here's a chunk of flow of main line that we're actually flow monitoring. So for reference, here's 238th. We got the byway retail, the apartments. The trunk line actually extends further east, actually, to in front of our building here. And we're at our first point where we're monitoring is a manhole right here, just at the byway where the hill kind of meets their apartments. And while we're monitoring that, that's the point of our diversion. And so all of the sewer flow from, I think, the original village, Tree Hill, this part of the city ends up right there. And right now we have an overflow that goes, past the freeway down to our 238th lift station right about here and forces it down Sandy. This lift station doesn't get used a whole lot, and we think there's a way to better utilize both this overflow and that facility by perhaps taking more of that flow, which would then reduce the amount of flow in the rest of the line. So we're monitoring what's coming from this part of Wood Village before it hits the diversion to see what can we do with that diversion. The next pot is right here, which is where our current flume is. That is where we do our current measuring. And this is just where all of the sewer south of the freeway leaves our system. So everything north of the freeway is a force main. So that gets measured through our lift station. This then takes everything else in the city. And we've got current measuring equipment updated through our SCADA project. So this not only will measure what our flow is, also it helps verify our new equipment, make sure that they're approximate, because there's no perfect way to measure sewer as we talked on Saturday, but these look close. So as the sewer line travels into Fairview down Bridge Street, it doesn't continue down Bridge Street to 223rd. It zigs and zags. So there's some backyards over here. And the last spot we're going to monitor is this manhole here just before it gets to 223rd, because there is no new sewer after this manhole. We verified that through our cammering, and it's much easier to put flow monitoring equipment not in 223rd. So we'll have what our flows are and then everything that Fairview is contributing, and that's how it'll help establish total flow as well as Fairview's proportionate share. And it's not just these homes you see here. There's also couple apartment complexes. There's actually quite a bit of flow in this part of our line, and that'll just really help us design an optimal line. So what's this going to cost us? Well, in our budget, we have $500,000 for kind of initial design work. We've done that, the camera work that I mentioned. This contract is just over $47,000. It will take 6 months of flow monitoring because the consultants want, wet season flow and dry season flow to really get that picture of what's going on in the sewer line. So we're using RH2, our contracted engineer firm, and they subcontract with US3 to actually do the flow monitoring equipment. So RH2 will be handling and managing all of that for just over $47,000. So again, next steps, we're going to execute the contract with RH2. They'll coordinate with US3. They'll bring out their flow equipment, and then basically it gets monitored for 6 months. And then, we'll evaluate the results and then use those to start drafting up design parameters and the actual design for that trunk line replacement. Questions?
How did we decide on who we were gonna contract with RHG? Have we worked with them before?
Yeah, so RH2 is our on-call contracted engineering firm, so they've done a number of projects for us. We also did reach out to Keller Engineering, who did our master plan work. Didn't respond. And there's only a few companies that actually do flow monitoring itself. And they tend to work not directly with clients, so you kind of need that intermediary. So we started with RH2 because they're our on-call firm. Great relationship with them. Like I said, we've done a lot of projects with them. And then Keller just wasn't responsive.
Any questions, Counselor Min?
No, no. I just really appreciate how thoughtful and strategic we are about, improvements and yeah, thank you. This is great.
You go back to the map, Greg. So if and when we decide to do the trunk line upgrade, it's what I'm understanding is basically from our last station to 238, or is it the whole thing?
So potentially so the trunk line actually starts right essentially across
Yeah.
the street, kind of back here on Halsey, runs back lot more or less behind Madera Court, crosses 238th, and that's where when it crosses 238th, the first manhole's that one right there. Then it jogs over here. When we get to this manhole right here, you kind of see a little stretch of a green line. That's where the rest of the village comes from, south of the freeway. So it kind of collects off of Arata, jogs down through the church, down Halsey from Wood Village Boulevard. It all ends up right here. So essentially by this manhole, that's the bulk of the city. Everything south of the freeway is now running through here. We just happen to measure it at our city limits. And so the thought is we'll be evaluating essentially the whole trunk line from across City Hall down to 223rd.
Okay.
Because we'll be capturing this flow here, not just for the diversion, but what is that flow from this part of the city. By the time it gets here, you just deduct this number from that number. That's the rest of the city, again, south of the freeway. And then you get this number, which is Fairview's contribution.
So then the project would be the whole thing, including Fairview.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. And this is actually where we're seeing the highest flow count. The line gets more and more full as you reach 223rd.
And then, so our portion of the project is the 3.3 million.
The total project, the engineer's estimate for the whole thing is 3.3.
Okay.
And then in theory, what happens is, okay, we can know the cost from our city limit east. Let's just say from that point to 223rd is $1 million. Again, using simple numbers. That's what would be split with Fairview. So to say this is $1 million, let's say 50-50. So Fairview would pay 500,000 out of the total 3.3.
And that's just like through an IGA we have with them. If any.
For the current IGA, that's what the language is. And that's where there may still be some negotiation, again, repayment scheduling. I doubt this is hitting high on their master plans and their project priorities. And so there may be some repayment schedules and things like that. So we've tried to connect with them on this for about a year, and with their change in transitions, it hasn't really landed. We think now moving forward, we'll have a connection, John, to get this on their radar as well. And again, flow monitoring takes 6 months, let alone then that design work and what are the design options. So there's still time to connect with Fairview and get this sorted out.
Thank you.
So do they have to agree with who we contract with?
No. So essentially this is our line, even though it enters into Fairview. So like for cleaning and whatnot, we are actually responsible for the maintenance of this line. But that's where then for bigger projects, it's a proportionate share of the cost because it does serve their community that pays them. Else.
We're good. Thank you.
Okay. Are you still stuck with me though?
Now is the discussion on Gresham burn ban fire code.
All right, so two parts to this one. First part is what I'm calling more or less required code changes. The other part is what we've been asked to adopt and approve. So first off, again, this is a discussion. We're not asking you to adopt anything this evening. Kind of give you some background on the code work, background on what we've been asked to do, and start getting your thoughts on it. So what I'm calling the required update is the state fire marshal has a state fire code. And since our municipal code follows that, it's supposed to kind of match, mirror, not conflict with it. State fire marshal updates their code every 3 to 5 years. We last updated ours in 2010. Now, when we did that, we thought we were being smart and kind of future-proofing it by trying to say we're just adopting the state fire code as amended, et cetera, et cetera. We were close. There are a few provisions, a few wordings that didn't lend that there. And why this got some attention is with all the recent wildfires and the the increased fire risk is there's been a lot more state funding to the state's fire marshal office, which has been asking fire departments, fire districts to do audits of the code and actually how code's implemented. So Gresham, doing their job and due diligence, looked at our code and said, you're close, but it's not from the current code. So in your packet, you would see some track changes there of what Gresham said needs to be updated. Mostly it's just removing references that we put into the 2010 code, and then a few updates on some verbiage, like we don't call it Gresham Fire and Emergency Services. I think we call it just Fire Service or something. So nothing in those revisions actually changes how we implement the code, because we, through our partners at Gresham Fire, have been enacting, updated code and updated standards. This just essentially takes us to what we've been doing and consistent with what's in our paper. So again, nothing changes operationally. It really is minimal changes to the actual code. And Gresham Fire did review this and make those suggested changes to be fully in compliance. So I'm going to pause there on that one because these are ones that we really, should do. So are there any questions on that component?
Councilor Amon, any questions?
None from me, thank you.
Now to part 2. And this is as Gresham Fire was saying, hey, you need to tweak your fire code. By the way, we would really like it if you could ban backyard burning. So I want to quickly define what backyard burning is and isn't, and then talk about the why. So backyard burning is when essentially you take your storm debris and you've let it sit for a few months and you make a little pile and you set it on fire, and now your storm debris is gone. It's not barbecues, whether they're charcoal or whatnot. It's not your smokers. It's not your recreational. You got your little fire table on your patio. That's not what we're talking about when we say backyard burning. This is essentially you've got a pile of woody debris and you're burning it. So back in that 2010 update, when we worked with Gresham, the 3 cities and Gresham limited backyard burning to 10 days in a spring season and a fall season. Prior to that, you could essentially, anytime in the spring or fall, call a burn line and say, oh, is it a burn day? And they say yes or no, depending on weather conditions, wind, et cetera. Well, starting in 2010, that was restricted just to 5 days, 5 Wednesdays and 5 Saturdays in the spring, and then again in the fall. The intent behind that was to essentially phase out backyard burning as its areas become more urbanized, denser, and we're getting more fire risks. Well, fast forward 13 years, Gresham actually enacted their ban. They put theirs together about a year ago, and this last fall was their last burn season. So they will not have, the residents will not have a spring burn season. There is a caveat in that because parts of Gresham, not so much Wood Village, are very more agricultural. And so you can still get an agricultural burn permit through a state process. So that's been exempted because there is already for agricultural burns a process for that. This is, essentially, I live in a home and I've got some yard debris, I'm going to burn it. That's what Gresham has prohibited, and they've asked the other 3 cities to do that as well. Why? As we said, over the years, we've become more dense, and we've seen, more risk in terms of fires. We've also seen increased air quality regulations. So we've already had it in the winter months. There can be wood stove ban days based on air quality and air stagnation. We've also done a lot over the years to really look at yard debris removal options for people. So again, you go back 20, 30 years, yard debris programs weren't quite what they are today. And you've got curbside, you've got area recyclers. We also have city events. So there are a lot of options to get rid of yard debris, which was the original intent behind backyard burning. Backyard burning is already prohibited by the state west of 181st, and I got a map to kind of show you the large region that cannot do any backyard burning today. Again, doesn't impact, great, I've got a barbecue or I've got a little recreational fire pit, doesn't impact that. Also, you know, when you think, I call them red flag days, where it's usually in the summertime where it's really hot, windy, and please, you know, they say, please don't use a barbecue or don't use a barbecue. Like that still is in effect. So here is a map, and I kind of cut it off more to our neighbors to the south, showing all the area in red you cannot burn at all, anytime. And so we're not too dissimilar density wise from the areas that are already prohibited from doing burning. And so Gresham now, DEQ hasn't updated this, but essentially all of Gresham will be in red, and they're asking us to join them in that. So some next steps. First question is about, you know, either code, whether you want to adopt, you know, let's adopt the state changes, but maybe want to do some process or more research on the burn ban. What kind of outreach do you want on backyard burning? What we typically see is most people that are a number of people that do burning are not necessarily burning what they're supposed to anyway under the current burning code. You're not supposed to burn like furniture, for example, garbage, for example, wires so you can strip the metal out of them. That's already illegal, not allowed in our city. This also, you know, prohibiting then backyard burning, then it's like, ooh, there's a big fire. That's not allowed, period, under this proposed regulation. So we could bring this back at your March meeting for both or one, and adopt our code. The goal would be at least bring back the state changes in March. And then we're really asking you, what would you like in terms of backyard burning? That is where I'll pause for questions and comments, discussion.
How would we enforce it?
All through Gresham Fire, luckily. So for example, let's just say someone's burning something. Someone called 911, says someone's burning. Gresham Fire actually does the enforcement, as well as any kind of citation or education.
What would be the response? That being more of like a not top priority.
They actually take that as a top priority. They do. They treat kind of those backyard fires pretty seriously, especially in the summer months. And they've even had it where they will put it out. If they kind of get a property owner or someone who's managing that fire not being cooperative, they will put it out.
Councilor Min?
I don't think I have any questions. It makes sense, especially the density wise, and yeah, like that can be pretty dangerous. So just to clarify, Greg, you're asking what we want to do for public outreach, and also like if we want to decide that now or if we want to talk about it at the March meeting, right?
So yeah, thanks for that clarifying, because I forgot to mention one piece. What Gresham asked us to do is change our code to prohibit backyard burning. People could still burn this current spring season, but we wouldn't then have a fall season. So if someone thought, oh, I was planning on burning, you know, later in March time, that could still happen. We just wouldn't have a fall burn season, so there'd be time to educate folks. But that really is the question: is that enough time to educate people in your minds, or, you know, would you want to ask people what they think of a backyard burn ban? It does seem like Gresham has asked us so we don't get told to do it, because it certainly seems like with what the state's doing, this is going to happen at some point. At least this way we can kind of control it to some extent, versus being told no more. And so the question about the March meeting was, we could bring back both for adoption in March and essentially tell people, we've been told no more backyard burning. This is the spring season's your last season. No, there won't be a fall opportunity, and then kind of do more outreach on options, tree cycle, yard debris, or that kind of thing. Or you could say, gee, we really want to use the spring season to ask people about backyard burning. We'll adopt the state code in March, but we won't adopt or consider adopting the burn ban until maybe later, you know, summertime. Or not at all. I mean, that's
Yeah, it sounds like it's something we're gonna have to do regardless, so it makes sense to me. No, I don't have any more questions. Thank you, Greg.
Um, roughly how many, calls or like people do you guys notice that do backyard burnings?
Well, I noticed someone burning last Friday, which wasn't a burn day. And that's the thing, a lot of, I think what we see is people doing any kind of backyard burn doesn't necessarily follow the rules today. I know there was a scrapper that would do regular burns, but again, that wasn't allowed. Um,
So when current residents do something like that, that's not something Gresham can enforce because our code.
Gresham does, so if they're burning, let's just say they're burning furniture because they don't want to pay to dispose of it, that is enforceable.
Okay.
Whether there's a backyard burn program or not, because you cannot burn furniture. If someone's burning, let's just say on a Friday, like this Friday, that's not a burn day, that's enforceable. I don't want to say like there doesn't seem to be that many people that burn because we really don't know. It also seems like over time, it's been less and less people doing backyard burning as we've kind of become more of a dense, true suburban community more than you go back 20, 30 years is more of a rural community feel.
Because I do feel that we could take advantage of using an educational component. Obviously, either folks don't know or just need another reminder, and then, maybe in that component, figure out how some verbiage is that, this is enforceable. These individuals that will come and, cite you or whatever the case may be. I would like to, I agree with Counselor Amanda. I think eventually we'll get there, but could we use this as an opportunity to educate? And then, from there, would our community, need more days of debris drop-offs or something like? And could that be something the city takes on or, look at those opportunities? Because some of our neighbors do have a lot of vegetation and then sometimes that curbside pickup isn't enough.
I feel like the impacts of the amount of people that are gonna be impacted with this is very small. Where we can give enough education, and I feel like 6 months is a lot of time to over communicate and give alternatives, as long as we're giving the alternatives to kind of like help segue that process of something that they're used to. I think that would be received well if 6 months very feasible, as long as we're giving more solutions. Rip the Band-Aid off next year.
Yeah, communicate early and often. Yeah.
So would you want the burn ban code in March or just have us do outreach kind of now through kind of this current burn season and kind of start setting the stage of so this will probably be your last opportunity as between air quality, safety, prohibiting backyard burning, but not do that code until a little later in case people come in with, I need this because of X, Y, and Z.
I like that. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, go for it. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I like letting people know, hey, there's this one last thing, and then it feels like a natural progression of now we're, giving the opportunity and resources and then implementing.
Okay,
Sounds good.
that's what we'll do. So at March, we'll bring back the state code and then we'll start doing some outreach on backyard burning. And then we'll bring that back at point TBD.
So just to clarify, we will be communicating to people that are looking at banning fires the fall and
That we've
advertising
been
the
asked
council.
to, we're considering it, and this is what it could or would look like.
That's the case, we should set kind of a date for when that is going to, we're going to start advertising it early and often. Should let them know when that is going to come back in front of council if they want to.
Yeah.
Talk about it, yeah.
What does fall look like?
We'll figure that. We'll put a little calendar together and I'll work with our partners at Gresham Fire as well to kind of get their, kind of what they did and what worked well and what we could replicate here in terms of that communication, outreach and timeline.
Has any of the other two cities done the ban already?
I don't know. I haven't heard that they have or haven't. So my guess is they haven't. But I can follow up on that.
Perfect. All right. Now we're on to Budget Committee recruitment.
So sit up here to make sure that I'm sharing the right presentation. All right. So, Council President, councilors, thank you. At your last council meeting, the question came up about what our the current status of the budget committees for both city and urban renewal areas were. So included in your pack is a staff report with some basic information in it, which I'll recap really quickly. So our budget committee is something that is required as part of local order and budget law. We have to have appointed citizen members on the budget committee to help review that and be part of the process where the city manager approves the budget committee, the city manager proposes the budget committee approves it, and council ultimately adopts it. And so that's all prescribed by Oregon revised statutes, kind of what that has to be done. It has to be noticed publicly in print, and we have to provide opportunity for public comment. So the citizen members of the budget committee are appointed by council. So the requirements to be on the budget committee are fairly low. You have to be someone living in the city of Wood Village, and you must be qualified to vote in an election for anything that we refer to the voters. The Oregon revised statute sets there a minimum for the number of appointed members being equal to the number of elected. Since we have 5 councilors, the minimum number of appointed members would be 5. There is no maximum. You can appoint everyone in the city to the budget committee. But practically speaking, it's usually a 50-50 split. Members can't be employees, officers, or agents of the local government question, so we can't fill it with staff. Members have a 3-year term, and we cannot compensate them for their service to the budget committee. We can't offer any financial incentives.
But we do offer pie.
To everyone who comes to the meeting, not just the committee member.
Is that a math joke?
No,
No, it was actually just pie
Okay, good.
pastry.
Don't mess with pies, Greg.
So the current roster, so for the city, we have 5 city councilors and 2 appointed members. Those 2 appointed members are the appointed members of the URA board that are not city councilors, Victoria and Stan Dirks. So Urban Renewal has 7 board members and 0 appointed members currently. So we have 3 vacancies on the city side and 7 vacancies on the Urban Renewal side. Now, state law does grant some exceptions for if you have tried to put appointed members on your budget committee and can't find them. That's fairly common, especially with smaller governments and special purpose governments. And so it's not a hard and fast rule, but that is the goal, is to try and have a full roster with equal members of electeds and appointed members.
Quick question. Why, how come our urban renewal? Why do we need more members for the urban renewal and not the council and not the city budget?
Because we have the urban renewal is everyone on the city council is appointed to that, and we have 2 citizen members for the agency board, legislative body that governs the urban renewal. So they are considered.
And those 2 members also happen to be on the city's budget committee. So they can't count towards the urban renewal budget committee because they're sitting on the board.
That's the reason, is that they aren't budget committee members for urban renewal. They are full voting members of the urban renewal board.
And so we need 7 additional for
If we were to meet the state guidelines for,
It's been rare that we've had a full, match on urban renewal, but we've had, 5 to 7.
and for the urban renewal, the same criterias are
Correct.
required as the,
yes, urban renewal has the same requirements.
didn't we have an individual that owned a business, who wasn't a resident?
Yeah, let's not go there.
Well, and that's, they were also appointed to the board,
They were an urban renewal board
Yeah.
member.
not a budget, they weren't an appointed budget committee member.
And that's a possibility.
You can be on urban renewal board and not live on the city, but in terms of being on the budget committee for urban renewal, you need to live in the city
Got it.
and be a qualified elector in the city. And that's why you'll see some communities have like a youth advisory council or board because they can't technically be on a budget committee.
Unless they're qualified to vote. So that's what our current roster is. So next steps, you guys solicited at the last board meeting, kind of, what do we do? And so just kind of looking at some best practices and what other organizations typically do to recruit. Here's kind of a list of who we might target or reach out to try and fill that. And this is not prescriptive from the state. I've worked for organizations where the staff was required to go out and shake people down to try and be on the budget committee. There are also some places I worked where staff was prohibited from doing that, and the elected officials were the only ones who could put someone's name forward for those committee appointments. It kind of varies from organization to organization, and there is no right way of doing it. So this is kind of what we came up with of where people generally get people to serve on their committees. So that's the presentation. I don't know. We're looking for council direction for what you guys want us to do in terms of doing an outreach solicitation, whether that's going to be on the part of council or staff to do some recruitment for these.
And one last bit of background, we did put this in our newsletter when we did recruitment for all open positions, whether it's planning, budget, et cetera. No one was interested in budget in that particular effort, which is why we're in this position.
Do you have a timeline of goal is to?
So we would, for this year, they would need to be appointed by the second week of April to be able to come to the budget committee meeting on April 21st and vote on that. We would have to have them fully installed by council in order to vote there. So it would be the week. We'd have to know basically 2 weeks ahead of that so we could put it in the staff report. And at the meet that we meet a week before the budget meeting, they would need to be appointed. That's the last city council meeting that we have scheduled before Manager Dirks presents the proposed budget.
And even with that timeline, it's a quick timeline to then get them from potentially brand new for budget committee orientation, understanding how to read the budget, to then doing budget work essentially a week and a half after that meeting.
So what week was it? April
21st is the meeting,
is the
budget
budget meeting.
meeting. So it'd be 2 weeks before that we would.
So your first meeting in April, everyone needs to be appointed by that meeting, ideally sometime in March. So it gives more time for an orientation. And even if it were, let's just say a past counselor or a past budget committee member, we'd still want to chit chat with them to get them up to speed on what's been going on lately. Like we would for any new budget committee member.
And what's their commitment like as far as meetings and whatnot?
So the only required meeting has been the budget committee meeting in April. So there's only one required meeting. We've run, I think 4 of the 5 years I've been here, we've only had that one meeting. We did 1 year have them review the supplemental budget that we were going to be bringing in the early part of the year to run that past them and also do some orientation when we made changes to the budget document in order to submit for the government finance officer's budget Excellence in Budget Award. We had, I think, 2 meetings to have them look at the supplemental budget and the changes that we were making to the format of the budget to make sure that we were going in the right direction. But that was a one-time effort, and we've talked about as points with community engagement, potentially having more meetings. There are some, especially with larger governments, the budget committee sometimes functions as the audit committee. If there's a lot of auditing that's going on, they also can kind of serve as meet more often. But to date, we haven't had a lot of appetite for more meetings from our current roster of budget committee members. So again, the more we ask of them, the harder it is to get people to fill that.
Could there be a potential of like you mentioned, you know, with the recruitment, doing like a 101 to kind of, you know, with maybe the newer or all members that wanted to participate?
Well, that's one thing. Certainly with any new member on any board, we do an orientation, whether it's budget, parks, planning, we do an orientation. And what we've kind of done, as Seth said lately with budget committee especially, is at least how we did the 5-year financial protection at your retreat, try to weave that into budget committee sometime before the budget hearing. So they've heard the same information that council's hearing to help deepen the understanding of why we develop the budget, or here are the bigger project priorities in the years ahead. And so generally there's an orientation meeting, budget hearing, obviously. There's a chance there could be a second one. If there is, it's typically more condensed. But then maybe some kind of pre-meeting for hour and a half prior to that budget hearing. So it really, you can think of it as, you know, orientation, maybe 2 meetings a year. This is essentially a recap.
So we need 3. So what, so we need 10 total?
They can,
The 3,
Oh, got you. Okay.
yeah.
Because
Can I-
we go ahead, Counselor.
No, I was just gonna ask it again for clarification. Like, so you're asking what we would like to do in terms of outreach to get these 10 positions by, I mean, that's a tight turnaround time. This feels like an all hands on deck situation, you know? But like what, for me, it's like all of the above and what can council do, you know?
Because, you know, staff can certainly reach out. We know who's served on past budget committees, or, you know, who's on parks committee right now or planning. And just, we can ask that question of them, say, there is this need. Here's what we're asking. What is your interest? As Seth said, there are agencies that say, staff, this isn't your business to get into. This is for us to do since we appoint them. And so we can certainly give you that list to ask people, or you could say, well, why don't you ask who's currently serving in our community in some capacity, see what their appetite is. Depending on what that yields, maybe then, yeah, talk to friends, neighbors, eligible electors.
Yeah, that. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I think doing a kind of like a combination of both, and maybe putting a date for council, say like the first meeting in March, maybe by then we can at least all identify an individual, and hopefully with the help of staff, you know, we all ask somebody, that's 4 of us, so obviously we could fill the city budget and have one or have 4 potential for the urban renewal, and then, you know, kind of even out the load a little bit, because I think this is one of the most important ones for the city to have, you know, and so I think that council should have a vested effort in doing it as well, with the short turnaround.
And in a lot of ways, you know, this is kind of the bench for city council. A lot of people, this is parks, planning, or budget, kind of serve on 1 or 2 or 3 of those committees, and then get more and more interested in potentially running for council, or when a seat comes up for vacancies, those are the people we also turn to, because they already know, hopefully kind of know the business and have shown interest. So, yeah.
So we could do is certainly email you all, link to an online application, kind of again, the snapshot of, call it a volunteer description. You can go out to folks, we'll go out to, I think we'll call it current volunteers. And then in that first meeting of March, just regroup and see what's come in and, where we may need to go depending on what's come in. How does that sound?
Okay.
You have an additional comments, Counselor Mark?
No, I apologize for being late. I went to YouTube and of course I subscribed to the City of Wood Village and I see that it comes up live and I went, what?
I'm supposed to be there.
I'm supposed to be. I turned to it to make sure that it really was and I saw my seat vacant. So I'm like, man, I'm out of here. So, yeah, so I apologize for being late.
No worries. But I think an early March would be a good, a target date, then that allows us extra flexibility to then pivot if we need to.
Yeah.
But
Well, what I heard was we'll reach out to current planning and parks committee members, maybe put a plug in the weekly, send you guys out a link, and then we'll update you at the next meeting if anyone from the current planning or parks commissions is interested, and if not, then you guys will each divvy it up and try and go out and corner a neighbor.
well, I think even in that same effort, all together.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't have to wait, but
Yeah.
well, thank you, Council President and councilors.
Perfect. So now we'll move on to community garden discussion.
Yeah, hope you enjoyed your intermission from me. You're stuck with me now till the end. All right. All right, community garden time. Now you may be asking yourself, why are we talking about community gardens? Well, jump in the Wayback Machine. From 2010 to 2017, the city actually operated a community garden. It was at our old city hall site. I got some photos of it. For the first 2 years it operated, there was a fee for a plot. And then people didn't want to pay a fee for a plot. So that second year, most of it was vacant. So then after that, we took it as this, you can reserve a plot, but there was no fee for that. That filled it up fairly quickly. And we had 25 plots. They were 10 by 10. They weren't really raised beds. They were dirt-ish mounds, mostly at ground level. And we averaged about 10 to 15 gardeners a year because several of them would have multiple plots. So you could reserve, one spot up until this date, and then you could get whatever's remaining after another date. The garden didn't really struggle with any kind of vandalism or that kind of thing, but it did struggle with what I call common space. So the rows between the plots, maybe the area immediately around the garden. And certainly if someone planted an early crop, they'd harvest it and walk away, and the rest of the plot would become overgrown. Or during the off season, a lot of plots would just become overgrown, weedy. So those were some challenges with the garden. Photo on the left, if you look right here where my cursor is, that's where the garden was. You can kind of make out the various plots and greeneries. Photo on your right is more of what it looked like on the ground. As you can see, it really wasn't like raised beds or just plots of dirt, but people grew a wide variety of items and made various improvements. But you can really see, how the pathways were shabby, and certainly off season, it was a pile of weeds. So why are we bringing this up? Well, in the three-city area, there does not appear to be any public community gardens open to people. That doesn't mean there may not be a community garden, but maybe it's ran by a private entity or some kind of nonprofit that's insular to its members. Gresham does have several community gardens. Most of them are like 202nd and West, and they're actually operated by an organization called Outgrowing Hunger. Quite neat, but it's only open to Gresham community members. Wood Village Baptist Church has talked about putting in a community garden, but we don't know how they may operate it, who may they allow in, they don't even have it yet. So it's tentative. And, we stopped having a garden in 2017. That was because we were redeveloping the site, relocating. There are still a number of community gardeners from that program that call us a couple times a year and saying, you getting a new garden? We've also had newer community members who've heard that we had a garden. You getting a garden? And this was brought up at the October Parks meeting saying, getting a garden? So that's kind of why we're bringing it back up. It was something that we used to do through the relocation, redevelopment. We didn't know where we were going to land, what it was going to look like. And there clearly is still some interest from our community in having one. So what we've thought of is we could put one here just on the south side of City Hall. I have a little graphic, next couple of slides. We picked that because there's area water availability, very important in the community garden, great sunlight with that southern exposure, and we do have security cameras. Not that that would necessarily prevent vandalism, but it may deter some vandalism. Instead of, plots of dirt, we would want it more manicured. And so we were thinking manufactured raised beds. We'd actually cover the whole area in some sort of weed preventative material, then cover it in wood chips, put the raised beds on it. So it'd be very manicured and able to kind of keep neat and clean, since we're in a more of a aesthetically pleasing area, less of a out of the way rural area at the old City Hall site. We would have to craft rules, regulations, look at fee structures, that kind of thing, which we haven't done yet. Certainly we could start from the program we used to have, but try to tweak it again regarding if someone abandons a plot, what do we want to do about fees? And so the question tonight is, A, do you want to move forward with exploring and looking at a community garden? If so, does that site seem to work? Also, when do we want to do it? We could try to do it for this current year, put together a little budget amendment, a bit of funds, put something down. It feels rushed, or it could be, okay, staff work towards getting community garden up and going by this time next year. So we're just, again, asking for what is your interest, appetite in putting together a program, and at what time schedule? So looking at an aerial, this is the area we're talking about when we say the south side of City Hall, just past the patio space there. And this is just a representation of what, the raised beds would look like. There's a lot of companies that manufacture them now that they may be some sort of composite, but they're food safe. They don't leach, chemicals in and that kind of thing. So a lot of them are about a 3x10. So our old plots were, a 10x10 is 100 square feet. This is, much smaller than that, but certainly it seems more manageable and elevated. So someone who's in a wheelchair mobility device may be easier to tend to that space. So a lot of this threw at you, open for discussion, thoughts and questions.
Go back to that last slide. There's a gentleman, local, that gets a hold of this type of material that's left over from some other projects, and he builds these. And they're very, very inexpensive. Gary, my neighbor across the street.
Oh.
Yes, he has purchased several of these, and he's a cheapskate by all means. And I'll ask him where it is that he
gives
got
that.
these from. So he traded out all of his the ones that he had from before, and he dismantled them and put these in. So, and they're all metal construction, and
Because some people use, I call them feeding troughs, water tubs, but with the heat, the galvanized, that doesn't feel quite right. Wood eventually is going to rot.
Right.
The ones we have in our Community Grove area are a food safe composite, but they were not cheap.
Right. Well, the metal ones he likes because it actually creates heat
Mhm.
and keeps it out. So I take it the cameras would be to keep the rabbits out?
Well, and that's hopefully being elevated, the rabbits.
I
But
thought
that was one of the big vandals. We heard that from former Mayor Smith, she rabbits. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you
Other-
can put up rabbit barriers.
Other thoughts, questions, concerns?
Any questions, Councilman?
I don't have any questions. I feel like this is great, and it makes sense for me for what it's worth. It makes sense for us to give staff that year, and and then to generate interest while that's happening. There's a lot going on, so I feel like this is really exciting, and so yeah, I think we have time, is what I'm trying to say, to do it in the way that we really want it to be done. This is great.
And this is just the thing, get the information and then kind of bring it back.
My guess is we'll probably actually present more than by your budget hearing. We'd have a little line item of community garden costs and a little more defined proposal of what that includes. And then we'd roll it out, probably start the construction maybe fall time or this time. So it's open by next spring and people know to expect that'll be open and can reserve a plot. It also gives you all time to consider what's important in that reservation process, any kind of fee or cost considerations.
And how big is that space you guys are looking at? Obviously in the aerial view, you know,
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of drew a circle
Yeah,
for the
yeah,
general area. We'd have to then, now knowing there's an interest in, go deeper with this. We would actually start measuring things out to make sure, one, it fits nicely with, I'll call it the multi-use spirit of the field, the walking trail and pathway. Plus, we know we've gotten some, I like to call it patio events that have happened with city hall reservations, and how can it all complement each other and not one overpower or take away opportunities.
I think it would also depend on the number of reservations that they get to, and then go from there.
Yeah, that was gonna be my question, is how much of this area would be impacted for the reservations and moving forward, and people maybe being reluctant to reserve?
Well, and that's what we would, the thought was have probably about 12 of these raised beds. So there'd be 12 opportunities. My guess is you'd want to hold it for just one per household or address at first. And this but since we got a little more time, we could actually do some, who's really interested in having, some community garden space. And maybe there's really big interest, and then turns out that space doesn't seem like it's going to fit the need of the community. And then we could try to pivot something.
because in the kind of the the southeast corner of the park down there, didn't we have like an edible garden?
Yeah, so right off the map where my cursor is, it's called our edible growth. So we have some raised beds, fruit trees. The water's a little different because it's ran through an irrigation system, so it's automatically irrigated. So you can't really put a hose spigot because the water is not flowing.
Right.
Versus the idea behind this, we just tee it off of the city hall service to put in a service, or use the existing hose spigots, for example, and try to figure that out.
And the security is not as good either.
Yeah,
More rabbits are back here.
And there's no sun.
there's no, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess it started out, an idea would be start out small and then on the demand.
Oh.
Because for me, like another thing we'd have to consider is like, say, someone does rent kind of the south part of that field for some activity, and now they're
It's a little
their
less.
recreation is, impacting that. So building, protective. So, because we want to make sure that all those things are protected.
And I think that's where, again, knowing that, yes, this is something we want to explore. Yes, knowing we need a program, just the multi-use field out, that helps us. We can start shaping more of that, because we are seeing more use and interest in our field. And what does that even look like? As an aside to a community garden space.
You have to keep the cougar food down, right?
Well, that's more of the south area. So.
Yeah, I get that.
Other thoughts, questions on the community garden? What I've heard is, yes, go ahead and start exploring, keep things in mind of both, active field use, city hall use, as well as potential big interest in a community garden, what that may actually need to facilitate that. Did I more or less capture the essence?
Yeah, but it's not a super high priority.
Yeah, it's working in, hopefully get some numbers for budget season and then keep progressing. Excellent, thank you.
Last is council retreat recap.
Not everybody at once. It was awesome.
There we go. All right. Yes, it was awesome. And we're going to highlight was our retreat here.
Oh, I see what you're saying, Lene.
So it was just this last Saturday,
You're right.
if you forgot. Held it here, 8 to 4. We had it facilitated by Martha Pellegrino, who was our facilitator last year, did a great job. A lot of the magic in this retreat is the work that goes in before the retreat, the interviews with council, staff, putting together agenda, the materials, which really then makes the retreat flow very well. So what did we talk about in the retreat? We did a recap of all the great works we did in 2023. We also looked, as always, our mission, motto, values, and goals. This year, there's a pretty brief discussion on them, which is, it's fun. Those things shouldn't be too terribly fluid and changing all the time, because it's always nice to confirm those are what we want to represent. Spent a lot of time talking about fire and fire service and where we're at with that. And, we all landed on, we like the ability to, some form of district, whether it's, District 10 that's doing something different, whether it's from our own with the 3 cities, that's where everyone's tended to landed on, with the primary focus on, we need something that matches our medical response needs of this region. We also landed on, we want the more aggressive timeline of a May 26th election, knowing that it may slip, but it keeps pressure on keeping this moving forward. We then had a 5-year financial presentation, which also outlined why we need to look at fire differently, but also that, we're good through a period and that we can actively invest into our systems, our infrastructure, our people, and that we need to be working towards some more sustainable funding options in the further future. Touched on master plans, again, water, our project on water, which is well 3. Sewer, we already had the presentation on where the trunk line. And then for our parks, certainly looking at picnicking options, lighting, our restroom, and then certainly that potential for that new wetlands park at Arata Road and Wood Village Boulevard. We then had a little less structured time for community engagement, and we had the board over there where we were writing down whether engagement opportunities around some targeted topics as well as general open topics. We're still, I don't want to say deciphering that, but putting that into a work plan and some workflow. And I got a slide on kind of where that's at the moment. We then folded things into the annual performance plan, and then throughout the day, certainly some team building, some laughter, and a lot of fun. So what this all cost us, the big part was our facilitation at $7,500, which was actually less than last year because Martha knew how we all worked and what we could put together. And then our food was about $375, which covered, the breakfast, lunch, beverages, and refreshments throughout the day for a total cost of just under $7,900, and the budget was $85. So saving money. So next steps, the big one again coming out of fire. So we've actually already met with some Troutdale representatives on the outcomes of our retreat. They got a hold of our packet early and already dived into it. So we talked where we were at with that, directions we're headed. Troutdale's actually, they call it their PSWAG committee, which is like some public safety advisory work group. They're meeting first part of March on a direction for fire. So they've got our materials and we're continuing to talk with them. Meeting with Fairview, their interim city manager at the end of the month, kind of really get them up to speed on the discussions that we've been having. And then we also have a 3 cities meeting, and that's kind of representatives. For us, it's the mayor who will be virtual, Council President Rios Campos, myself, and Seth, as well as representatives from the other 3 cities talking about where we left off from our last meeting and where we're headed. We've also put together a very draft of that local stakeholder list that was requested at the retreat. The handout is in front of you, or Councilor Amanda was emailed to you prior to the meeting. Again, very draft at this point, but certainly start taking a look at it, who's on there, who's not on there, and, just email us back any comments or ideas you have on that. We didn't necessarily list specific individuals, but rather kind of referenced, oh, there are some folks really engaged in that tiny home conversation, for example. So certainly be thinking about that. We'll continue to refine that list and build that stakeholder list. So yes, we are looking at that big post-it board of the thoughts and ideas for community outreach and how a lot of those will probably actually kind of work their way into an APP deliverable. For example, when we talk about legislative action in the next session, yes, we're probably going to see some maybe what can we do for funding for disaster resilience? What can we do for affordable housing, specifically manufactured home ownership opportunities in there? So we're going to weave that into a lot of larger APP umbrellas with specific deliverables as we work through that. We hope to bring a draft APP back to you in March for adoption in April. So that's where you'll see that come back, as well as probably a larger narrative around just all of the thoughts around the engagement, education, and involvement opportunities. And that's, again, we have our budget hearing in April, which really informs what we're going to be doing the next fiscal year. done a lot of talking. We went around the room at the end of that event, a lot of, 8s and 9s. So it seems like everyone had is worth a beautiful Saturday of your time. Really focused our direction for the next, not just year ahead, 18 to 24 months ahead on some strategic areas. So, but certainly want to give this opportunity for your thoughts, your comments, things that maybe you thought of since Saturday that you'd like to share.
We'll start with you, Counselor Min. Any thoughts, comments about Saturday?
I really enjoyed it. I feel like, I think this is my second one now. And yeah, I just feel like I get to know all of you better and we work together so well. Yeah, I just really enjoyed it and feel refreshed and inspired. Also, side note, Seth, I borrowed your ice pack and I forgot to give it back to you, but I put it in the front freezer. So thank you.
Thank you.
And this was my first of retreat, but yeah, Seth, thanks for the hot sauce. No.
Yes,
but-
second.
I wouldn't been able to eat my food without it. But all jokes aside, it was really enlightening to just understand a little bit more and be more in depth with everything and just understanding how people think within the council and the staff. That helped me kind of understand everyone's thought process and kind of how we come to decisions that we do. So.
I really enjoyed it as well. I enjoy them every year that I've had the opportunity to do so. The only thing that I wish we could have done was switched the inside and outside, where we could have had an opportunity to visit with the other 4 that we didn't have the opportunity to do. And
I think we have some time tonight.
oh, yeah, perfect.
I'll be on the inside.
Yeah, I was on the outside last time.
Yeah, Greg kept pushing me out.
He kept pushing you
He
out?
kept pushing me to the left.
She kept talking after the 2 minutes.
Oh,
I'm an overachiever.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm glad to learn that. Because see, we didn't.
No.
That was a downside of that
connect.
exercise. You got to talk, but you never got to switch the opportunity.
Yeah. Anyway,
She probably thought it was gonna be too late for us to figure that out.
you have to say that a little louder.
I said she probably thought that was gonna be too tough for us to try to figure out how to move chairs. So let's make it as easy as possible.
That's
to the
true.
left.
That's true. But I thought we did really well with the beanbag. That was awesome. And I'm glad they didn't have us go backwards with it. Yeah. And you remembered that from last year, which was really good too. So, and I completely forgot that. So, anyway, I really liked the discussion on the fire services. I thought that we really came away with quite a throughput on that. Because I wasn't quite sure that we were really going to pick up the ball with that because we didn't 10 years ago. So I really think that we might be onto something, and I really appreciate this, what we're doing tonight. So.
Yeah, no, I think initial conversations with Martha, the goal was the fire. Fire has, I think it's a priority, and then that's really going to dictate a lot for what the city does, I think, moving forward. So we can, having that discussion with the whole council and staff was crucial, and I think it was interesting from having separate conversations with the mayor and Greg, but then the rest of the council, how we kind of all collectively still gravitated towards like that middle and really didn't want those outer options that were presented. But I think it was great overall, and I think we came out of it with a great direction for a lot of things. So it was really good.
So Greg, how do you think we came away with that?
Oh, I
love to
thought
hear
it was,
the
I mean,
staff's
we
thoughts.
certainly got a lot of solid direction, not just on fire, but again, engagement, enrichment opportunities for our community or community priorities that may feed into legislative support or advocacy or just general community education, whether it's around disaster preparedness. What does disaster preparedness look like or mean? what does the city even do or not do? So, you know, it'll be really fun and intriguing to really start putting together some packages and programs based on that exercise and seeing what comes out of it in terms of specific outcomes. And so, like I said, I gave it a 10 because while, you know, it wasn't necessarily, you know, perfect and staying on task all the time, maybe, you know, some missed opportunities. There wasn't a lot that could have been a lot done differently. And certainly what we got out of it was worth their time that everyone invested in that day.
Well, you remember I gave it a 9 because I didn't feel like that we had enough input from you, and you said that you're going to fill that gap in with the budget. So I'm happy with that and give it a 10. So
Great. Well, thank you
You're
very
good.
much.
I don't have anything to add. Not only did we get everything out of it, we got done early.
better than a stick in the eye, better than a stick in the eye. And Becky?
It was good. It was very productive. There was a lot we had to go through and really powered through it. So
There were
It's a
big
good time.
topics too. So I
Yes.
mean, you
Yeah.
know.
It wasn't a light agenda.
no.
Oh, no, not at all. So.
Yeah. I have one more question for Becky. Are we your favorite council?
Absolutely.
I knew it.
No hesitation.
No pressure, but sweet.
Oh, yeah. Now you say that.
She's sweating over here. You don't see it.
I guess that's it. No Jeff, so nothing.
No Jeff, no mayor. So
Mayor, no, nobody. All right. Yeah. Cool. Then we won't keep us any longer and the meeting's adjourned. Okay.
you all very much.
So the shortest meeting ever for me.